The interpretation of narratives is to some extent subjective because everyone can experience art differently. At the same time, using literary analysis, we can still explain the most reasonable meanings that the artist meant to convey or that the audience is likely to understand. To understand themes of any work of art, however, spoilers are involved. Heavy spoilers. So consider this your spoiler warning. Metaphorrefantazio, the Persona-style JRPG social sim of Atlas's Studio Zero, is a grandiose narrative that uses many, metaphors to develop a multitude of themes relevant to our society. It has so many themes that I had to break up my usual biblical themes video into 3 separate videos. In this first video, part 1, we're going to take a look at how ReFantazio discusses the themes related to the impacts of intense feelings. The game explores these emotions primarily through the motif of magla, the magical manifestations of powerful emotions in the United Kingdom of Ukrainia. In this video, we're going to answer the question, how is ReFantazio a metaphor for the impacts of powerful emotions? The first major theme in the game related to the impact of powerful emotions is that of fear and anxiety leading to madness and irrational behavior. This theme is conveyed through the motif of melancholia crystals and melancholization. In the game, fear and anxiety can cause magla to crystallize as melancholia crystals. These crystals can attract monsters and cause both people and monsters to experience a form of madness, viewing anything and everybody as a threat. In Ukrainian society, this manifests in ways like tribal prejudice, violence, and self-destructive behavior, as well as irrationality. The first major example of this is the instance of Sanctoress Joanna. Sanctoress Joanna had a relationship with a man from another tribe and became pregnant with a half-breed baby. However, her nanny, out of fear and anxiety that the half-breed baby was somehow responsible for the human attacks, kills Joanna's baby in her madness. This, in turn, leads to Joanna's depression and melancholization, where she is also affected by madness. When she comes upon a human that has some baby-like qualities, she believes it to be her deceased son, and she begins kidnapping children from town to feed this human. Despite her own child being killed because of irrational prejudices, she also kidnaps and indirectly kills the children of the very townspeople she is supposed to be leading. This idea of madness is also demonstrated through the motif of blind faith in both Sanctism and the Mustari religion.
The more anxious the people grow, the more they choose blind fanaticism over confronting their fears. This was no fault of yours, simply their nature.
In Sanctism, the prayer word closure sounds like it is derived from the English words close your eyes. This is even hinted at by Gallica when the word is first introduced. Throughout the game, it is implied that many people believe in Sanctism out of fear and anxiety rather than careful consideration and faith. This blind faith leads to a form of madness, irrational behavior, as demonstrated in Yufa's follower Bond's story arc about Hyperic. The Sanctor Hyperic, out of fear for the sick, eventually becomes mad and believes that the sick are ill because of sin. This madness causes him to desire to sacrifice himself and all the ill to God. Many of the Mustari, too, are implied to have been driven to blind faith through their fear and anxiety. Their faith requires them to offer human sacrifices, their priestesses, to their dragon god, and they are eager to do this evil deed as a result of the madness caused by their blind faith.
But still, see the truth. Is this your God?
At its most extreme, this theme is developed through the motif of humans, the abominations twisted through extreme amounts of magla, fueled by fear and anxiety. Near the end of the game, it is revealed that through focus of intense magla, Luis can make the fear and anxiety manifest and turn people into humans. Luis turns the protagonist into a human briefly. Luis turns Zorba partially into a human. And as Luis faces the fear of losing his ideal world, he, too, succumbs to the madness and becomes human. In the Bible, fear and anxiety can also lead people to madness and irrational decisions. When God gives the Israelites the Promised Land, they are driven mad by the fear of the Nephilim, the giants. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we had gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land, to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to one another, "Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, "The land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. Numbers chapter 13, verse 32 to chapter 14, verse 10. Rather than obey God and find their courage, the Israelites chose every other irrational response, weeping desperately, complaining against Moses, wanting to return to slavery in Egypt, wishing they had died, and eventually even preparing to stone Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb. This irrational behavior is just like the madness that comes from the fear and anxiety of the melancholia crystals. However, sometimes the fear and anxiety leads not only to madness, but additional consequences like tragic loss, which leads us to our second theme. A second major theme and metaphor related to the impact of powerful emotions is that of grief leading to death, but love leading to life. Throughout the narrative, many characters experience tragic loss, which causes them to lose the will to live. Heismay, the Ujif, had a son who was killed as a result of tribal prejudice. This is why Heismay lives in seclusion among giant sandworms, because he has lost the will to live. When the group confronts Joanna, Heismay attempts to convince her to see the truth of her madness and to choose life, because he himself has come to see that he should live for the love of his son.
Grief is its own death, so we will show you life!
The Nydia, Alonso, also loses the will to live when his mother is killed by the wealthy landowner Dadaram. However, Alonso's mother's last words to him were for him to live. So though his grief would lead him to death, his love for his mother allows him to continue to live. The same is true of Basilio when Fidelio dies. Fidelio sacrifices himself so that Basilio can live on. For the love of his brother, Basilio chooses to live on. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses tells the congregation to love God and choose life. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice and holding fast to him. For he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 to 20. Like Moses, ReFantazio repeatedly emphasizes the value of life over death and to go on living even after experiencing grief and loss. Not becoming overwhelmed by fear, anxiety, madness, or grief becomes an important idea in the game. Instead of fear leading to madness, metaphor offers an alternative approach, which leads us to our third theme. The third theme related to emotions for today's video is how confronting fears and having courage leads to strength and power. This theme is particularly highlighted through the motif of the archetypes. fear and anxiety manifest in melancholia crystals, but confronting fears and courage manifests itself as the archetypes. Archetypes are a form of heroic magic awakened by the courage to face fears. This is illustrated by the awakening cutscenes, where the protagonist or his allies awaken to their archetype by pulling their hearts out of their chests. This symbolizes no longer being controlled by their fears, anxieties, and insecurities. Instead, the heart is made of metal, and after they declare their courage through their heart of fear, the heart becomes the armor that gives their archetype shape. In other words, when the good guys confront their fears, they turn their courage into heroic magical power, their strength. This motif of archetypes is repeated for every playable ally in their awakening. Stroll faces his fear of being a selfish and useless noble, and instead declares his courage to fight to serve his people. Hulkenberg faces her insecurities of being a knight who failed to protect her prince. Ismay faces his fear of being a failed father, and so on and so forth. Through finding the courage to face their fears and anxieties, the protagonists find power. In the book of Joshua, God has similar ideas about the importance of confronting fears, but different perspectives on causality. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 to 9. Rather than courage leading to his supernatural strength, it is God's supernatural presence and power that leads to strength and courage. Even with this distinction on causality, it seems that people naturally understand that courage is a form of strength and power which can serve to inspire hope in others. This idea of inspiring hope leads us to the last theme for today's video. The final theme of ReFantazio, related to the impacts of emotions that I want to cover in today's video, is that of true hope leading to a better future. The reason for this distinction of true hope is because the game brings up certain types of hope that are not ideal. Sanctism, the state religion, and its leader Sanctifix Forden are false hopes. Through sanctism and prayer, the people hope they can be saved from the threat of the humans and the injustices in society. However, the game portrays the teachings of sanctism as blind faith, and hope in its corrupt leadership as misplaced. Similarly, Count Luis is also a false hope, a false savior. Many in Ukrainia hope that Count Luis will bring about a society of equality without prejudice. Yet, within this seemingly good idea is the reality that natural selection and survival of the fittest seems inhumane and cruel to the weakest members of society. The reality Luis would bring about is portrayed as a world without hope for the outcasts. And indeed, near the end of the game, it is revealed that Luis's solution is the solution of a man who has lost hope for a better future. Luis himself represents the loss of hope, one who fears entrusting others or believing in the possibility of a better future.
Deep down, you're afraid to admit to yourself, you're the one who's hopeless now.
Similarly, near the end of the game, it is revealed that the king was also a young man full of ideals who lost hope in those ideals. Initially, the king's hopes inspired Luis as a child, but as the king's hopes died, so did Luis's. Instead of the hope leading the world to a better future, the disillusionment of both the king and Luis leads to injustices in society. On the other hand, the protagonist represents one filled with hope and one who inspires hopes in others. The protagonist is initially introduced as the childhood friend of the prince. Though the prince was cursed, the prince hoped he could be the type of prince to help people and bring about the ideal world in his fantasy novel. However, it is later revealed that the protagonist is not the prince's friend, but he is the prince's spirit, his ideal self come to life. In other words, the protagonist is the manifestation of the prince's intense hope, given physical form through the power of Macklin. In fact, this is even referenced through the subtitle, ReFantazio, which in Italian means fantasy king. The protagonist is the fantasy or ideal king, which the prince hopes he can become. When the prince eventually dies, the protagonist merges his spirit with the prince's original body, becoming the true prince of Uchronia. His motto throughout the game is to help anyone in need. The prince becomes the hope of not only the Sanctists and not only the outcasts, but all of Uchronia.
You gave up on your hopes, but I will not.
If the king and Luis both represent different leaders who have lost hope, the prince represents one who hopes to the end, and then in turn becomes the hope of others. The prince's ideals and how he is a true hope is represented through the ideals in his utopian fantasy novel, a key symbol of hope in the game. The novel presents an ideal society and what the prince hopes to achieve, a utopia. So he becomes the hope of his kingdom. In the book of Hebrews, the concept of hope in an ideal is also discussed. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Hebrews chapter 11 verses 1 to 3 and 13 to 16. The author of Hebrews discusses heroes of faith, believing and hoping for an ideal world, heaven. And again Isaiah says, "The root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles. In him will the Gentiles hope." May the God of hope fill you with all joy, peace, and believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. Romans chapter 15 verses 1 to 4 and 12 to 13. Like the fantasy novel the prince carries around, Paul suggests that the teachings of the Old Testament are supposed to bring about hope in the people, especially in that it prophesies a true king that will bring about an ideal world.
Is that the role you would seize? A true king in body and soul.
ReFantazio is a truly majestic, epic fantasy filled with highly relatable themes about human emotions. In this first Biblical Themes video, part 1, we took a look at how ReFantazio views the way emotional responses like fear and anxiety, grief, courage, and hope impact people. In the next video, part 2, we'll take a look at the themes of ReFantazio that relate to the politics of an ideal world. That's all I have for you in this video. Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.